Today I'm going to be putting together a shelf that's going to be used here at our studio to hold some of our supplies. So I have this piece of wood that I'm going to be starting with, and this is just a 4-foot board. It came from Lowe's, and these are really cheap. I think this board is less than $4, so a really good deal on a nice, sturdy, solid piece of wood. And I'm going to stain it, and I wanted to show my method because I have a way that I stain that is very clean and neat, and it makes the least amount of mess. And so I have my gloves on. I have vinyl gloves, food safe gloves, but just something that's not going to leave any residue, because if it's food safe it won't have powder in it, so it won't mess up the color or the finish of the wood. I have what I need to open up my little can of stain, so I have a flathead screwdriver and a hammer so that I can seal it up when I'm done. And then I have the brush that I use every time I stain, because this stuff is really greasy and it's going to ruin your brushes. So you don't pick a brush that you love, you pick an old brush that's okay to mess up, because even though you can soften the bristles back up, it's going to look like this when you're done, so it really ruins it. So I use this one every time. To wash the brush, I'll just put some water and dish soap into a cup and just sort of leave it in there for a couple of days and come back to it. And then I just sort of sling it out to sling it dry, and then hang it up so that way it drips dry. But I don't use any of my good towels or paint rags on it, because I don't want to get all of this greasy stuff on everything. So my favorite stain to use is one that almost looks like a gray or black color mixed with brown, and it's the Jacobean. And it feels like this jar is getting pretty low, but I know that I have enough to finish up this last piece of wood. So another thing that I wanted to show is when I do staining, I also do it with the least amount of stain as possible, and so I wanted to show how that's possible as well. And it helps to have gloves on to do that, because we're really going to get our hands all over this and spread that stain out as thin as we can get it. Unless you want it to be dark, you really don't need a whole lot of it onto your wood. It starts to soak in after a while and it will look really dark, but after the first coat it will look nice enough, and you can almost leave it at that. So adding more on there just takes longer to dry, and it's really wasting your stain because it just soaks right into the wood. And so we're going to do a very thin coat. We'll just get this opened up and I'll show how we get started. So to just explain a little bit of what I'm doing, I'm getting very little, just a dab on my brush. I'm also tapping it off onto the lip of the can before I lift up, because I don't want to drip on the paper and waste any of it that way. And then I'm just sort of putting a couple little dabs right onto the piece of wood. And then with my gloved hand, while it's still fresh, I just start to move it around and get it into all the cracks and into the grain of the wood. And it's a really nice way to get a really thin coat that's even. You don't see any brush strokes, and you're not soaking any extra stain into the wood unnecessarily, because a thin coat like this will not only dry faster, but I think it looks a lot better than when you just sit there and totally saturate the piece of wood, because once it's dark enough, you really start to lose the look of it. The point is, you want to see the wood grain. You want to see all those neat little patterns in there. And if you just soak all of the stain into it, all it's going to look like is a dark brown or even a black color. And that's not really what you're looking for. Otherwise, you would just use black paint to cover it up. So this spot right here is almost getting a little too dark for my liking. I like it to still have that look of the wood on there. It's just darkening it up. So we'll do the same thing. We'll get to these sides, we'll get to the whole top part of it, and then we'll get to the bottom. And I just have my piece of wood sitting on some newsprint. At our studio, we use newsprint rolls to cover our surface areas, to cover our tables that we work on, so that way we don't mess them up or get any paint or splatters on them. And the newsprint, we actually get it for very cheap, sometimes free, from local newspaper printers. So whoever prints your local newspaper for your area, they always have what they call end rolls. And that is when the roll of paper that's on the press gets to be too small. They take it off, and then they usually get rid of it. But if they can sell it for $1 or $2 a roll, they will. And you'll get a lot on one little roll of newsprint. And that can last you for a long time. Especially if you're only crafting as a hobby and you're not going through a whole bunch of it every week. One roll of newsprint can last you a while. So you'll get a pretty thick roll that's got on the side of it maybe about this much sometimes if you get a good one. And like I said, these newspaper companies, they pretty much just want somebody who will pick it up. They don't want to drop it off. They won't deliver it to you, but if you'll come by and pick them up, you can usually get as many as you can fit in your car for just a few dollars. So a pretty nice deal for something that's really handy and saves you a lot of hassle, because if you try to buy rolls of brown paper or this type of like newsprint material from a Home Depot or a Lowe's, I've seen rolls for $12. I've seen them for $20. I've seen restaurant supply stores online selling them for $35 for a roll that is very similar in size and length to the ones that you can get from these newspaper companies. So no need to go and buy anything fancy or expensive from these restaurant supply stores or Home Depot, because a couple of dollars and you can get something that's just as good. This stuff gets thrown away. It doesn't need to be any super high quality, fancy, sturdy paper. It just needs to be something that can cover up your space you're working on and then be thrown away when you're done. And I don't want to get this stuff on the floor, so I just put this down before I start working on my project. So now I have the whole top part of the wood done. When you're handling it, you might have a little bit of stain on your gloves, and sometimes these little cracks and areas where you have a little bit too much on there, you might get a spot on the wood. So just while it's still wet, just rub it in with your gloved hand, and that'll avoid having any spots that end up drying too dark. The sides are usually very smooth and also easy, just as easy as the top and bottom to stain. The part where you're going to get an issue and it's going to be harder to run your hand and brush along is on the end of this piece. So right here where it's cut, it's a lot rougher. So in this edge, you're going to have a harder time, and you'll just sort of have to use the brush right there and just tap it along. So I'll show how that works. And then we'll just go ahead and get the rest of this piece of wood covered in stain. So I'm just finishing up the last little bit here. This last corner. There's going to be mostly what you'll be seeing on the shelf is the top part of it. You won't really be seeing the underside too much, but I don't want to leave any spots like this. If your shelf is going to be going down low somewhere and not really going to see the bottom, then you could choose to just leave the bottom looking plain like this, and that would be okay. I love when the wood has these little neat little knots in there like this, if you can see that. It gives it so much character, and I think it's so cool. You can see where maybe a little branch was growing in there. It's really neat. It does make it a pain if you're trying to put a screw through there or a nail, but I love that it gives it that special look onto the wood. So I'm just, as you can see, my brush is so dry. If I shake it, you don't see any drops coming off. I just have barely enough to rub this stain into it, and then I do the rest with my hand to get a nice thin coat. This does smell really strong. The stain, that smell will linger in the air for a few days. Depends on how much you've done. So try to air it out if you can. If you can do this outside, it's even better. But if not, just kind of leave it in a room that you don't go in that much, or try to air it out if you can with the fan. And open up the door. Sometimes I'll do that, as it does smell pretty strong. Or just do it right before you go, and then you've left the room or the area for a while, and and has time to air out on its own. So I'll just leave it on this piece of newsprint to dry. And this actually looks like such a fancy little shelf when you're done with it. It looks like something you would have spent a lot of money for. I'll go ahead and take my gloves off now so I can show what I'm going to be doing to hang this shelf. I want to show the I have these little brackets, also came from Lowe's, and these brackets are about $6. It has everything you need in there. It has a couple of anchors and it has the screws. So one screw to go into the wood and then another one to go into the wall. And so I just put these underneath, and I'll put 3 of these because this is a 4-foot board. So I usually put one on the left side, one on the far right side, and then one right in the middle for extra support, depending on what I'm going to be putting on the shelf. But I don't want to have anything too heavy and have it come crashing down on me. But such a simple way to make a very upscale looking shelf that can go into your living room. It can really look nice in any room of your house, but like I said, we use them here at our studio to kind of put our supplies around the room. And it's really easy to put together. This thing will just take a couple of days to dry before I can put these little brackets in there, and it'll be ready to go. When you go to close up your stain, just be careful. You want to set the lid on there carefully and give it a little gentle whack with the hammer right on the edge. I say gentle because if you hit it too hard, you might get a little splatter that comes off of the lip here, and it might get on your clothes. So you can even help out by putting a finger right here and just gently tapping all the way around. You'll see the lid start to slide down, and you'll know you've got it. You don't really want to go whacking it too hard and then you've got stain all over you. I've got a little bit on my arm here, so other than that, I did pretty good because of the gloves. And this is kind of a pain to try to wash off your skin, but and definitely will not come out if you get it on your clothes. So wear an apron or something like that to stay clean. And this guy is going to be ready to go in just a couple of days. That's it for today.